Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. What's up, mindful community? I am back with another episode, and I want to talk to you all about important habits that I think can be really essential for you if you are in a season in your life where you are trying to grow, evolve. You really want to pay attention to your wellness habits. You want to tap into ways to manage your well-being. I'm going to share 5 important things that I think you should be doing if you want to increase your mental health, but most importantly, even if you want to see a shift in the relationships you have with people, but also the relationship you start to have with yourself. Whenever I hear people talk about habits and routines, they tend to be transformational habits that are centered around behaviors such as eating healthily, going to the gym, maybe maintaining a morning routine or a night routine. But I often don't hear conversations around mindset habits. And so that is what I want to spend today's episode focusing on, because there are different tangible things that you can do in your life. It's really great to have some sort of routine built into how you manage your day. I think that's great. But I also think it's extremely important to pay attention to the way that you think and see how the way you think is influencing your behaviors. So the first wellness habit that I have for you is setting boundaries. That should not be surprising. You already know how I feel about setting boundaries. In episode 3, I break down the difference between rules and boundaries, and I'll give you a little snippet here as well. Rules are guidelines that we impose on other people. Boundaries, however, are guidelines that we impose on ourselves. And generally, we start to understand what boundaries we want to hold based on the rules we create with people. So when you think about your overall wellness and you think about your overall well-being, this idea of what it means to protect your peace, this idea of what it means to be grounded, to feel safe, to feel secure in yourself and even in your relationships, you are going to have to learn how to set rules with people, but you're also going to have to learn how to uphold those rules through your boundaries. If you don't do that, that leads to people-pleasing habits. It also leads to a disruption of your well-being because you are prioritizing the needs of others over your own. And there are going to be times in relationships where you do need to compromise, where you are going to have to be flexible. But then there are also going to be times in relationships where you are going to have to choose yourself. And that is going to make other people uncomfortable. It is going to disappoint other people. It might frustrate other people, but you cannot live a healthy life if you are constantly engaging in self-neglect and self-abandonment. And so a habit is something that is practiced regularly. If you do not practice setting boundaries regularly, then you are going to stay stuck in this cycle of people-pleasing and self-neglect and self-sabotage. So you have to get into the habit of learning how to say no to people. You have to get into the habit of recognizing when compromise is not an option and you have to choose yourself, you have to choose your needs, and you have to communicate that. So the first wellness habit for you is setting boundaries. Now, the second wellness habit that I have for you is to learn how to not take things personally. I've had people in my close circle say to me, I'm so surprised at how you handle certain forms of conflict because you tend to always maintain your peace in the midst of chaos or when you are facing some form of rupture in a relationship. If someone frustrates you or there's a particular pattern at play, you tend to always just have the same kind of reaction. And that is because I've learned a long time ago not to take people's actions personally. Personalization is a cognitive distortion, and it is basically irrational thoughts that influence our emotions as well as our behaviors. And so, personalization is when you absorb blame for everything that is happening to you, but it's outside of your control. You make everything about you, even though it's not about you. So you call your friend, they didn't answer, you blame yourself. Oh, they must find me annoying. They must not want to talk to me. And this whole time, your friend didn't answer because they were in the shower. They didn't answer because their phone was on silent. They didn't answer because they weren't in a space where they could pick up their phone. But you are in your house having anxiety, possibly having a panic attack, and telling yourself all of these negative stories as to why this person took too long to respond to your message or just didn't answer the phone in general. That leads to increased levels of anxiety. Sometimes it can lead to depression. And it honestly sucks away the joy out of life if you move through the world assuming that every single thing somebody does is about you. It is not. People engage in behaviors based on what is happening in their own inner world. It is not about you. Even when people are hateful and harmful, it is a reflection of what is happening internally for them. It is a reflection of their own ideologies. It is a reflection of their own belief systems as well as their own value systems. You have to remember that people have their own worlds that they're existing in, and how they choose to exist in that world has nothing to do with you. So if I miss your phone call, please don't take it personally. It's because I'm not available. So, personalization is something that I really encourage you to do the work of challenging whatever ideologies are attached to the circumstances that you are taking personally. Another thing that I encourage is to practice self awareness, to be able to reflect and identify when you are taking things personally. Again, you cannot control people, you can only control yourself. And so it's really important to be able to objectively see certain situations and ask yourself, what would it look like for me to put myself in that person's shoes? This particular thing that I assume is my fault, could there be other possibilities at play here? And if I take the time to step out of my own world, maybe it would allow me an opportunity to see other perspectives. Because the other thing about taking things personally is that sometimes it can be a little arrogant, and it can be a form of entitlement where you kind of are saying that you are the center of attention so much, everything is about you. And by having that ideology, it takes away from you being able to understand other people's perspectives or the circumstances that they're facing, because you chronically make everything about you. And so, by not managing your anxiety, you now put yourself in a position where you're making someone else's behaviors or choices about you. And it often takes away from the support that they may need, because now they have to comfort you because you're feeling bad about a particular situation when maybe they behaved the way they behaved because they're going through something. So you really have to pay attention to the stories that you tell yourself, because sometimes these stories are so grandiose that we don't even realize when our ego is in the driver's seat, and now our self-esteem is so inflated that we're making everything about us. So again, wellness habit number 2 is not to take things personally. Now let's jump into habit number 3, because this is my favorite one. I encourage you to get into the habit of learning to mind your business. I find when people are struggling to mind their business, it is because they are projecting their own beliefs and values onto other people. And at some point, you have to take a moment to pause and recognize that people get to have an opinion. And if you do not like their opinion, you as an individual get to decide if you want to be in a relationship with this person or not. We have to get to a place where we understand that people are going to make whatever choices that they want to make. They're going to abide by certain beliefs and ideologies that fit within the world that they've created for themselves. And unless it is causing you harm or potentially someone else harm, we have to recognize that there are going to be times where people are simply making choices. And just because their choice makes you uncomfortable, it does not mean their choice is harmful. You just don't like the choice that they're making. And people do not have to make choices that make you feel good. Now, to move on to the third practice, Mindful with Mina is the name of this podcast. You all know that everything I talk about is centered around mindfulness and using discernment. And I think that that is a very important habit to develop. You have to learn how to be mindful and use discernment in life. This has to be a habit that you engage in regularly because discernment is a form of wisdom that helps us to understand the decisions that we should make. In this culture of wellness, one of the things that I find people are struggling with is this idea of what does healing look like? And I always tell people, you have to decide that for yourself at times. What is healing for me may not be healing for you. There are certain things that you might decide to engage in that I may not decide to engage in. So when it comes to your growth and your development, you have to use discernment to say, if I engage in this action, does it align with my beliefs, my values, as well as my goals in life? If it does not align with either of those things, why am I doing it? Why am I investing in it? Why am I giving it my time, my energy? Why am I allowing this thing to take up space? Is it because I think other people want me to do this? Is it because I think it's the right thing to do based off societal standards? Because once you start living for other people, you are not living for yourself, and that is going to lead to your own demise. And so discernment is the tool that we utilize so that we can live a full, abundant life rooted in the things that we desire. So now I'm going to get to my last point. And the last wellness habit that I have for you is to communicate as often as possible. Again, a habit is a practice that we engage in regularly. And I find that so many ruptures happen in relationships because we stay silent when we're confused, when we're afraid, when we're uncomfortable. And we have to utilize communication if we want to see our relationships move forward. We are wired for connection, which means relationships are critical to our mental health and the management of our well-being. We need people. And there are going to be times where relationships can bring up stress, it can bring up fear, it can bring up so many difficult feelings. Our past relationships can disrupt the present relationships we're trying to create. And I find that poor communication leads to greater ruptures. So if you're confused about something, be willing to speak up and ask for the clarity that you need. In all relationships, whether it's with our friends, family, even colleagues, open and honest communication builds trust, but it also plays a role in fostering a healthy environment, and that environment is the system of the relationship itself. When we don't have open and honest communication, this leads to misunderstandings and conflict that can arise in our relationships. And so by articulating our thoughts clearly, we can resolve issues more effectively, and we can also learn to live in harmony with one another. Because nobody wants to be in a distressing relationship. And the only way for us to manage the stress that happens in a relationship is for us to engage in communication. Be willing to speak up. Be willing to ask questions. Be willing to be brave enough to say, this bothers me. Be willing to be brave enough to also say, I actually feel really anxious in this relationship and I want to tell you why. Do you have the space to sit with me in this? Be willing to let people show up for you, but the only way that you can do that is if you learn to engage in the habit of speaking up and communicating. So, those are my 5 wellness habits that I encourage you to start engaging in immediately. The more you engage in a habit, the more it becomes a part of your day to day life, the more it becomes a normalized behavior for you. And so, we want to make sure that we are engaging in adaptive coping mechanisms versus maladaptive coping mechanisms, where maladaptive coping mechanisms are strategies that give short term results but lead to long term consequences. So, we want to make sure that when we're developing a habit, it is a healthy habit because you can also have an unhealthy habit. So, these are my suggestions. Learn to set boundaries, learn not to take things personally. Learn to mind your business. Start that habit immediately. Also, utilize discernment. What is something in your life right now that you need to use discernment for before you make a decision? And most importantly, learn how to communicate effectively. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on your preferred platform. Also, don't forget to share it with a friend and on social media. To stay connected with me and my work, follow me on social media and subscribe to the Mindful with Mina newsletter, which can be found on my website, www.minab.com. You can also continue learning from me by ordering my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available at all major book retailers. Stay tuned for a new episode next week, and most importantly, remember to be present and stay mindful. Take care and goodbye for now.